Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to all of you on behalf of APAC News Network. Today, we have with us Sridhar H from Salesforce, who will be talking about Salesforce strategies and initiatives planned towards the retail segment on the supply chain management and different facets. Welcome, Sridhar, to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Rajneesh. Thank you to you and the APAC News Network for giving us this opportunity. Really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Uh, just for briefing, APAC News Network, we are a media organization headquartered out of Noida with a pan India presence and outside India presence in Singapore, Malaysia, and Dubai. And we focus on technology deployment across different focus verticals like government, healthcare, education, BFSI, enterprise IT, SME, and manufacturing. Primarily, the discussion maybe the best way to start would be uh, if you can brief us about the Salesforce solutions and services focused towards the retail segment and sort of elaborate on their use cases.
Sure, sure. Um, to start out with, let me just say a couple of quick words about Salesforce, the company itself. We started as a SaaS company, way back in 1999. So we've been in, business for about 23 years, and we are a global company and well recognized as pioneers in the SaaS industry. We are also well known for our CRM software, which runs 100% on the cloud. Now, coming to your question about what we do for retail, this is again something where we have a long legacy. We work with hundreds of retailers around the world, including many retail brands in India as well. We work with some of the most well-known brands in the industry across the world. Now, specifically to the point about what solutions we provide for retailers, and specifically in the retail industry, um, they span essentially the entire customer journey, right? So we tend to look at everything from a customer journey perspective. So if you are a shopper and you are looking to go to the internet and look for certain products, trying to understand what is available that meets your needs, and then you shortlist the choices that you have, and then you make a decision to purchase either in a physical store or go to the online website. And then of course there is a fulfillment aspect of it that comes into the picture, where again, like you said, supply chain and logistics and everything makes a huge difference. And then associated with that is payments, and then there is logistics and things like that that ultimately make that delivery happen. We essentially cover the entire gamut of this journey that I just described. So essentially Salesforce provides solutions to retailers that help them go online, provide omni-channel fulfillment capabilities. We help companies deliver world class customer service, a unified omni-channel customer service as we like to call it. Employee engagement and collaboration is another big focus area for retailers. Digital marketing in terms of being able to attract the right kind of customer segments to come to the stores and buy from us. And then affiliated solutions such as loyalty programs and analytics. So these are all pretty much the the functions and the use cases that we solve for retailers around the world.
Okay. The important question that comes in, for retail sector and for different other sectors like say even pharma and FMCG and those, the supply chain is very critical. And what the last couple of years during the pandemic we have seen, there has been a lot of disturbances or disruptions in the supply chain.
Yeah.
How can technology and especially the Salesforce solution mitigate the challenges evolving out of disruptions in the supply chain, and what has been your role there?
Sure. So that's a great question, Rajneesh. And I think the COVID, sort of incident that we've all been enduring for the last couple of years has been really a wake up call from a supply chain perspective, right? But before I go into that, I just want to emphasize another point that I just made a little earlier, which is that ultimately, Salesforce is in the business of helping retailers deliver a consistent and personalized experience across multiple channels and touch points, right? We help them to build a deeper relationship with customers, and help them to nurture those relationships. And one way to do that is to again look at that entire journey, which also includes fulfillment of the products that they want to buy from the stores or from websites and so forth, right? So supply chain, from a consumer standpoint, could be considered almost like an invisible kind of a thing. It sort of happens behind the scenes, so to speak. And I think COVID really sort of provided a wake up call, because in the good old days, agility was a key factor in designing your supply chain systems. But what COVID taught us was, not only do we have to be agile, but we also have to be resilient, right? So what that means is that, you know, given the fluctuating demand patterns that we saw, there was a lot of store closures. Customers didn't know what store was open, when was it open. When goods had to come across different state borders, there were a lot of restrictions put into place. So essentially, the entire supply chain was thrown into disarray, and that put a lot of retailers in a difficult position and were unable to stock the shelves, especially with the products that customers were looking for. And as you know, there was a big debate about essentials and non-essentials that happened, right? Essential products were doing really well, and non-essential products were many of the stores were actually just had to stay shut. And all of these products are dependent on supply chains for supply and fulfillment, and this saw a lot of disruption. So where Salesforce came into the picture was, one, be able to go to alternate channels for selling those products, namely online channels, right? Many of our customers, including India and around the world, were able to quickly say, okay, my store is closed, but how do I continue to serve my customers, right? And online was the sort of the easiest answer, and many of them went live with e-commerce sites in a matter of a few weeks, right? Now on the back end side, we have a very open platform that helps us to connect with any sort of a system in the back, right? It could be inventory systems, it could be warehousing, it could be ERP, it could be logistics, third party delivery partners, and so on and so forth. So thanks to that platform, whoever had Salesforce as their core CRM platform was able to do that and get visibility into what is the status of the inventory that is ordered, right? Orders on order. And then based on that, they were able to get insights through our analytics tool, which we call Tableau. They were able to build dashboards to really understand the state of the supply chain, so to speak, to understand where those choke points were, where disruptions were happening. And then they were able to take business decisions very quickly to readjust that supply chain network in some sense, right? So they had to look for local partners in some cases, because the out of state partner was not going to work because of the border closures and so forth. So they had to look for an alternate partner, they had to onboard that partner, and then start allowing them to supply goods based on the demand that they were seeing from customers. So we were able to marry up that consumer demand signals that we were getting through data, and then based on that analysis, retailers were able to take the most optimal business decisions for them. So that's probably the best way to describe how we were able to address this challenge.
Okay, thanks. Just elaborating on this, as you rightly mentioned, what happened was a lot of the retailers moved from a physical to a digital environment during the pandemic. And you mentioned some of the challenges, the importance of data, the way once they started the online. So, data was one part of it. See, overall, it's a sort of a sudden paradigm shift, which the business considerations necessitated that.
Right.
So there would be myriad of challenges. One, when the CRM was using uh, the retailer who was predominantly doing physical and depending on basically footfall might not have, though I'm sure even they would have uh, been leveraging CRM and data to some extent. But in digital, it was
Yeah.
almost imperative they have to use. So, one was that shift. Second is suddenly security, the issue of security becomes paramount. The moment you go digital, it's through payment gateways and things that the connection. Even otherwise, the infrastructure, not all, say, very large retailers, they might have already had a digital imprint. But
Yeah.
those whose digital imprint was minimum, how was the transition, sudden transition, taking place, and where did you help in
Yeah.
that transition?
No, I think that's again a very great point, and I absolutely agree with you. I think not everybody was prepared, and not everybody's experience was very smooth in making the transition from a physical only to a digital only, kind of a paradigm, right? So that was a big shift, and unfortunately, many retailers, were not able to make that shift, right? That's the sort of the reality. At least in the first few months, I think they were quite paralyzed by the sudden shift that was required. But you are right in the sense that larger retailers were a little better prepared, and especially if they had made certain investments in digital technologies in the past, that really came in handy. Obviously, nobody knew that COVID was going to happen, but some retailers had the foresight to make the shift towards digital, because the shift towards digital has been happening for at least 5 to 10 years, well before the COVID pandemic struck, right? So the retailers who were a little better planned, I think they were in a much better position to make the shift. But going back to your question about, okay, what did the others do? I think once they took stock of the situation, I think they kind of essentially came up with a priority list in terms of what could be realistically done, right? Can we really start selling online? And our traditional customer base, are they the ones that are going to also make the shift to online channels and start buying from us, right? And that again was a key business decision that many retailers had to make. But what did happen was they started partnering with other ecosystem players, and this is something that we saw was quite unique to India as well. um, a lot of interesting partnerships came up, like for example, Domino's Pizza started sort of partnering with I believe it was ITC, if I'm not mistaken, to sell ITC products in a bundle, right? The basic stuff like atta, sugar, oil, so these kinds of things. And Domino's Pizza guys were actually delivering it, right? So we saw a lot of these partnerships to say that, look, you have some digital infrastructure, because people have been ordering pizzas online and through the mobile app, and through call centers for a long time. So many of the consumer goods companies wanted to ride piggyback on this infrastructure, and they were able to get past that initial paralysis and shock. And then slowly they also started digitizing basic and critical processes, right? Like for example, it could be onboarding a supplier or a merchant, right? And having a digital catalog, having a inventory of the assets across the network, bringing their stores online, digitizing for example, the generation of an invoice, for example, or generating a receipt and sending it to somebody, right? So a lot of these things which were being done in the physical world were now being transferred to the digital space, and slowly they got a lot more confidence, and they were able to get back on their feet. And that is again one of the things that we saw, was that the resiliency of many of these retailers, even though they were ill equipped initially, after the first 6 months they were in a much better shape, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. And another point you mentioned, I'd like a little more elaboration on that.
Sure.
Many of these retailers where they will have multiple other enterprise applications were already there. There can be an ERP, there can be certain inventory management software. We are talking about the CRM from Salesforce. There can be certain other supply chain management kind of solution and multiple other enterprise application. And they were typically working, most were typically working in a physical environment, and whatever the digital imprint was, that was lesser. So in that scenario, this integration was happening in a certain way. When suddenly the shift happened to almost completely digital, these application with integration with different enterprise application becomes a challenge for those organizations. So how did you help manage that?
Yeah, again, this wasn't again, very easy to do, right? And if you take one of our, largest customers, Titan, which obviously is a household name with iconic brands, such as Tanishq and Fast Track, and so on and so forth. They were one of those, retailers who had successfully made the transition, right? And when I say that, what I mean by that is, the stores were closed, and therefore employees could not come into the stores. Obviously there was no footfall or visitor traffic coming into the stores, but they had to deploy these employees in a different manner, right? And that is when they built an application on top of the Salesforce platform. And as I mentioned before, because the platform is open, it is API friendly, we are able to connect with a myriad of systems, whether it is inventory or your ERP systems, merchandising, pricing, promotion systems, warehousing, and so on and so forth, using all these APIs, right? So that makes the integration relatively easy. And they're able to go to market in a much quicker time frame. And what Titan did was to really build a sort of an application which ultimately now is being deployed in pretty much all of their retail stores, which acts as an assistant to the store associate, right? So they had the initial version of this application built out during the COVID lockdown phase. And the bottom line here is that yes, connecting to various systems, some retailers did it as point to point integrations, which was again a sort of a short term decision. But those customers who had Salesforce were able to really take a more longer term view of it, saying that, look, this situation is going to continue, and we cannot continue to have our business suffer because of this. We need all the information that is necessary to serve our customers better, and therefore they leverage the APIs and services that are available to bring in any information that was relevant to conducting their business, right? So this is again just an example of how we've done it with one retailer. But there are many such cases where we've helped similar retailers do that.
So, can you indicate some of the referenceable customers and the use cases that happened there other than Titan?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can talk about, we have a very good footprint of, retailers and, consumer brands that have leveraged, Salesforce over the years. Um, One of the things that, we are very actively talking about is, this whole phenomenon of, DTC, right? Which is a direct to consumer, phenomenon, which again has been accelerated, thanks to COVID. And a lot of the emerging brands have realized that while it's good to have a physical presence through a retail store network and so forth, there's ultimately nothing like reaching out to your consumers directly and delivering that brand experience in its entirety, right? So one example I can give you in this case is Firefox bikes. They sell bicycles and other sports bike kind of equipment for outdoor biking and so forth. They have recently gone live on our e-commerce platform. So e-commerce is a sort of a mainstream use case that we help many retailers with. There are other brands such as Puma, Kikos, which is the baby products brand. We have Pepe, which is again an apparel brand. So there are many such brands which are running on the Salesforce e-commerce platform. The other use case that we you know uh, you know have a very good footprint, especially in the retail industry, is in terms of digital marketing, right? Because in today's world there is a lot of noise, there is a lot of competition. Everyone is vying for that customer's attention. And if you need to stand out in that clutter, you need to deliver and reach out to your consumers in a very specific manner, right? And you need to be personalizing the communications and the messages that you send them. Otherwise, you're just going to look at that as a pesky SMS message and you're just going to delete it, right? So that is where sales, a lot of these brands like GRT Jewelers, Joya Lucas, PC Jewelers, Starbucks, many of these customers are leveraging our digital marketing capabilities to essentially first of all message customers about promotions and other communications. But over a period of time, they're able to nurture a relationship with them and enrich the customer profile data, so that you can really build meaningful relationships with those customers over a period of time, right? This obviously leads to building advocates and loyal customers out of them. And this is a big focus area for us in India, and we've been very successful with some of the names I just mentioned. Yeah.
Thanks. For this digital marketing, the two imperatives, if I understand correctly, especially the examples that you have given, is need to use analytics very extensively uh, on that data, and not just using analytics, but using it to generate very meaningful insights.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, on that anyway, we can appreciate the Salesforce CRM has been built on that premise of great insights. So the problem with many of these retail outlets you are mentioning, some of the referenceable names that you gave, they are relatively, if I may use, except maybe a Titan, uh, are not very tech savvy.
Hmm.
In terms of they might not, like I know Titan has a separate chief digital officer, a CDO also.
Right.
But these organizations might not have that. So the data on which analytics is applied itself might not be, if I may say, extremely authentic, or say it's very heterogeneous, and a lot of complications might be there in that data. So
Yeah.
how the Salesforce solutions ensure and that a proper digital marketing is done, so that the data is not spurious, and
Yeah.
ultimately proper analytics can be achieved on that.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Rajneesh. I think if you collect garbage, you're going to get garbage out, right? So the insights are not going to be very pertinent or insightful, right? Um, so one way to solve the problem, of course, is anything within the Salesforce ecosystem. So if they are using, let's say, our CRM platform, and they're using some of our digital marketing tools, or our customer service platform, which is again something that I forgot to mention in your previous question. Customers like Hometown or Praxis Retail are using our customer service product as well. So I think the real benefit that we bring is by providing a unified customer engagement platform that has various capabilities that extend from digital marketing to e-commerce, to sales and customer service, and beyond, right? um, you then are solving the data problem in some sense, right? Yes, if data is coming from third party sources or from outside the organization, then yes, you definitely have to do a quality check on that data, understand the validity of that, and the quality is something that we have to be worried about. But once it gets into the Salesforce system, it obviously when you're recording, let's say you get a call on a contact center number, and you're looking up the person's information. You say, "Hey, here is the last case or a complaint that was logged." All of that information is absolutely authentic, and you can go back and retrieve that information no matter how long ago it happened, right? So therefore, by having a unified view of that customer, you are in some sense avoiding that data problem. But you are right that if the data does come from other third party sources or from external sources, we have to go through a cleansing exercise before we put it in the Salesforce system. And once it's in the Salesforce system, we have obviously in-house reporting tools and analytical tools available. We have AI capability through Einstein that is applied on the data. The AI mechanism chooses the model, it chooses the attributes for scoring. A lot of the predictive capabilities are all inbuilt, so you don't really need a lot of an army of data scientists to get that insight out. And of course, Tableau, which has been our flagship business intelligence and reporting and data visualization tool, makes it easier even for business users to draw insights from the data, right? So the whole point is about how do you democratize the data and give the power of insights to rank and file of your organization, so that they have access to the most updated current information, and they can take business decisions actually based on the information that they're given, right? So that's one way to look at that.
And what about you correctly mentioned, many of these, especially in the current digital environment, are reaching out to customers through omnichannel. So it
Right.
can be mobile, social, the bots, whatever be it. So again,
Yeah.
how do you help manage these retailers when they need to reach out to their customers in turn through an omnichannel environment?
No, absolutely. And again, omni-channel, I think, is a reality today. The lines between physical and digital are blurring, and it continues to blur every single day. While there was a big shift towards online and digital during the pandemic, and some behaviors are going to likely to stay. But I think as the shoppers, we all love the experience of going into physical stores, and the look and the touch and feel is something that is all part of our DNA. And therefore retailers have this unique challenge of really putting the focus back on physical, but at the same time also investing in digital and online channels, right? So that throws up some unique challenges. And what we do is we look at everything from an omni-channel perspective, and what it simply means is that the number of touch points is just going to keep increasing every day, right? And there is really nothing you can do about it. And customers are also adopting these channels at a very rapid rate, because they're very tech savvy. Especially if you look at the younger generation, they take to these tools and social media platforms um, in a big way. And therefore retailers also have to be omnipresent, right? They have to be present wherever their shoppers and consumers are. And that includes all of the things that you talked about, right? It could be social media platforms, it is going to be on mobile apps, email, the web, contact center. All of these channels are going to be relevant and valid. Yes, there will be shifts that will keep happening, and retailers will have to keep monitoring that, so that the investments that they make will probably have to be rebalanced and optimized, so that they're getting the best ROI. But what Salesforce does is that we essentially provide a single view of that customer, right? We have something called as a customer data platform, which essentially takes the information from all of these different touch points and channels that we just spoke about, and ultimately it finds its way into the customer data platform. And that data platform essentially helps with rationalizing the information that is coming to it. And it can help you to through artificial intelligence, it can actually help you to identify, you may have a account on Twitter with a particular handle, but you also have an account on Facebook with a different username, right? And using the AI capability, I can actually identify that you are actually the same person, but just with different account names or user handles. and then it therefore creates a golden record of that customer ID, and then that information is made available to anybody within the company that needs that information, right? So it could be a customer service person or a marketing person or a salesperson or an e-commerce seller. So everybody can tap into that single view of that customer through that data platform, and then they can create their own audiences. They can segment it at a very granular level, and then they can take actions and execute campaigns and so forth, which are highly personalized in nature, right? So this is something that we've been very successful with, and a lot of the names that I mentioned earlier are now seriously talking about it. Like, for example, PVR Cinemas, which is in the sort of the the retail and entertainment business, I guess, has actually leveraged this platform to create that unified customer view, right? And there are many other retailers who are actively exploring that, because if I don't have a single view, I'm going to deliver a very disconnected experience to the customer, because I don't know that Rajneesh who came to the online is the same Rajneesh day who is now walking into my stores, right? So I want to be able to tap into that intelligence and say, well, he's already done some browsing. Let's pick up that and make it contextual when he comes to the store, and he wants to get more information about a particular product he's interested in, right? So that's the way we solve this disjointed experience problem, which is something that is really a daunting thing from a retailer's perspective, because the shopper's journey is not very linear today, right? They leverage all of these tools from their perspective to their benefit, and they just expect retailers to be omnipresent. But Salesforce has been quite successful in sort of overcoming that challenge.
Thanks. You explained that very lucidly. One more on the business side question. What's the sort of GTM engine that Salesforce follows for these retail customers? How do you approach them?
Yeah, there are multiple go to market paths available within Salesforce. The first and foremost is obviously our direct seller channel, right? We have account managers and account executives who are mapped to various retail accounts across the country, divided by territory, north, south, west, etc. But also we also look at the size of the the retailer in terms of the number of employees and the number of stores that we have partners who are also working in tandem with us to take these solutions. We are supporting our sales ecosystem with a very robust pre-sales and solution engineering team, which is actually the team that I belong to. We come with deep expertise now, not only the products, but also have a deep understanding of the industry trends and expectations and the challenges that industry players go through. So we really try to build um, not only a case for, from a technical perspective in terms of what our products can do for a customer, but we also back it up with business value services, which also proves to them the real tangible value that retailers can obtain when they make investments. And last but not the least, we have professional services which can come and help you with implementation and deployment of projects. Customer success is again a very important function for us, because we are in the SaaS business. um, we can only be successful if the customer is successful, right? And they realize value, and therefore customer success is very important for us, and we have dedicated people who ensure that customers are realizing tangible value. And then we also, if you look at the sort of the extended ecosystem, we have a lot of ISV partners in addition to implementation partners that extend the value of the Salesforce platform in very small niche areas which are very industry specific. And if a customer is already invested in the Salesforce platform, they can extend the value by adopting some of these ISV applications as well. So that's the entire gamut which I just talked about, and all of these entities, they work in unison to ultimately help our customers succeed. Yeah.
Thanks. So last would end with if we look at the next 3 to 4 quarters, maybe specifically in terms of the retail trends that you are witnessing, what are going to be Salesforce key focus areas?
Yeah, again, we have a research, a unit within Salesforce that constantly and at a very regular basis conducts both first party as well as second party research. We reach out to retail companies, executives from the industry directly, but we also reach out to consumers and shoppers alike in various parts of the world, including India, to really get a pulse for what is really happening in the industry and what are those emerging trends and how are things evolving, right? So I would say that from a retail industry perspective, I think there are probably 4 or 5 areas that we see are going to be very important. One is the fact that there is more and more of digital adoption, both from a consumer standpoint, and therefore retailers are responding by investing in digital to serve their customers better, to sell to them more effectively, and so forth. But what we feel is it's not necessary if you just are able to sell and service, but you also need to be able to humanize that experience, right? And that humanizing of experience is going to be very essential for you to drive loyalty among your consumer base. Okay, so that's one big trend that we see, and a lot of retailers are looking at ways to humanize the customer experience that they deliver, which of course ultimately will be through their store associates and employees. But the way to do that is to really equip them with a lot of information that is very contextual, and that will help them to deliver a better experience. So that is one. The other thing is, and I kind of touched upon it a little earlier, is to unify e-commerce or commerce across multiple platforms, right? Yes, while we are talking about well-known channels such as the physical stores and websites, and now mobile apps are becoming important, but the trend is that shopping can be done anywhere at any time from any place, right? So that's the big trend that we see across the globe and as well as in India. So you may be able to buy off of a social media platform, for example, right? You may be able to place an order through an Amazon Echo kind of a device, which is sitting in your living room or your drawing room, right? So a lot of these new ways of transacting and buying are going to be coming up very soon. You can already buy things through YouTube videos, for example, right? So all these things are emerging, but ultimately whether it is social commerce or traditional commerce or just plain old e-commerce, retailers have to really strive at delivering unified experiences across this entire spectrum, and that is going to be very important from a consumer standpoint. The third thing is, this is the flip side of providing customer service. Customer service also has to keep up, and it is going to be omni-channel, because customers are used to, again, multiple platforms. They expect you to be there. If I have a question on WhatsApp, I expect you to answer that question for me, right? It may be a simple thing as, what is the status of my order, right? For that kind of a question, I don't want to necessarily pick up the phone and call a 1-800 number and wait for 10 minutes before I get an answer. And therefore I'm going to use the best tool that is beneficial to me and saves me time, and that is a social media, a chatbot, for example, right? So customer service also has to be unified, and that, as I said, can also help in humanizing the experience. And in fact, customer service is really becoming the next frontier of customer experience, because many of our customer surveys have said that a vast majority, almost 90 plus percentage of consumers have said that they're more than willing to make another purchase after a great service experience, right? So it's really important to treat every transaction not just as a transaction, but actually a beginning of the next sort of a continuation of that relationship. And then, of course, there's automated service like chatbots, like I talked about. Vernacular support is going to become, more and more important. Then the other thing is that, like I said, the focus is going to be again back on physical retail. But the retail stores will evolve into more of experience, centers. It has to provide that, sensory experience to shoppers who walk in. It cannot be just a transaction, which obviously you can do through various means today, sitting in the comfort of your living room. So why would you want to take the trouble of driving through traffic and find it difficult to find parking and so forth, if it is just a simple transaction? And of course, with quick commerce becoming really quite widespread, you're able to get a lot of things in 15-20 minutes today, right? So therefore, the retail store itself is going to be reimagined. Of course, a lot of the digital technologies that we are used to are going to be brought into the store environment. And therefore, the in-person shopping experience is going to be vastly different, I think, in a few years from now. And of course, the advent of the metaverse, artificial augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, all of these technologies are going to make its way into mainstream retail. And retailers will use them to deliver superior and memorable experiences. And the last one was again about partnerships, right? Partnership is the new mantra. And everybody knows that anything can happen from a macro perspective. There are wars and pandemics. Who knows what's going to happen? And but therefore, you got to be resilient, and the way to continue to be resilient is to have strategic partnerships, right? And build out your, whether it is from a supply chain perspective, or it is from a labor perspective. um, it could be delivery services. So really, retailers have to think about what are their core strengths, and what would they be better off doing with partners, where the partner may have some expertise in some other different area, and that could be their sole focus, right? So I think retailers are going to rethink whether somebody is a friend or a foe, I think, in very different ways in the future.
Great, sir. Thanks a lot. That was very interactive and informative for us. Thanks a lot. Very insightful.
Thank you, Rajneesh, and some great questions. So I really enjoyed the interaction. And again, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and to APAC News Network for this. Thank you.